I think people really appreciate it when John Cullen is a guest here on Crowdsource the Truth. How are you tonight, John?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Jason.
It's wonderful to have you back. You and I have been working together for over a year. We've developed really a good working relationship, a friendship, a virtual friendship. You've been doing incredible work, and you know, everybody's got this on their mind right now. We're approaching 2 years since the most deadly mass shooting in modern American history, and amazingly, new information keeps coming forward, not because of the New York Times, not because of CNN, because of John Cullen. What have you found, John? It's pretty shocking.
Well, as you said, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department stopped releasing video footage a while back, so there's not a whole lot of new evidence to work with. So what I started doing was reviewing some of the older footage. And I went back to some of the classics, some of the reference footage, like the Raymond Page footage, the Cory Langdon footage. And when I was reviewing, when I was reviewing the Cory Langdon footage, I went to the Las Vegas Review-Journal's YouTube page and pulled up their...
Let me take you back for a second, because it's possible that not everyone watching right now is as familiar with the material as you are. Cory Langdon was the taxi cab driver who recorded one of the most important and one of the first that I saw videos of the shooting, and she captured audio from underneath the awning kind of driveway ramp in front of the Mandalay Bay that to me very clearly indicated distant shooting and close shooting.
That's right. And she even commented on it. And we had that footage. I had that footage here locally. And I was watching the Las Vegas Review-Journal's iteration of it. They edited it down to just less than 5 minutes. And as I was watching the footage, I realized that they had made some edits in the footage. And I found that curious in that there's only 5 minutes of film that they're showing. Right. And so the question is, why would the Las Vegas Review-Journal edit anything out of this thing?
Right.
So I wanted to quantify those edits, figure out how long were those edits. You know, was it 1 second, 2 seconds, or was it more? And as I figured out where the edits were and how long those edits lasted, of course, that drew my attention to what did they edit out. Right, so here's the staff at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and that it is the biggest newspaper in Nevada, and they run a number of other newspapers. So as you said, Cory Langdon is the woman who was driving this taxi or Uber that night. She pulls into the Mandalay Bay. She films a good portion of the shooting from the taxi chute in there. And I downloaded the video from Las Vegas Review-Journal, and they claim they're the most trusted source for news in Nevada.
Right.
And yeah, so their video has been seen by 180,000 people, give or take, when I put my video out. And the net of it is, what is the big deal about these edits that they made? The big deal is that, they're cutting out evidence. They're eliminating evidence, and in doing so, it gives you a different impression of what has happened. And in the first 60 seconds of Cory Langdon's footage, they made 2 edits. And they didn't make any other edits. There's no other edits. So why did they make 2 edits in the first 60 seconds? And that became the question. And as I dug in, and I look at the segment that they cut out of their video, it became pretty clear why they cut this section out.
Tell us why.
Well, we see aircraft flying northbound over the venue, and there's nothing on flight radar. Meaning there's no official aircraft that's supposed to be where we see aircraft according to the flight radar record. And yet we see two aircraft, one's flying north and one's flying south over the venue. Mm-hmm. And there's just no explanation for these aircraft. Number one, and number two, why would anybody cut that out? And in particular, why would anybody cut that out less than 48 hours after the event? Meaning, I hadn't published any videos yet.
Right.
There was no helicopter theory, so to speak.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second, because again, we've got a lot of people watching now who maybe aren't familiar with the work that you've done and the theories that you've presented. But since you and I have met, you have been advancing this theory that helicopters were used to perpetrate the attack. You've presented a lot of evidence over a number of shows on Crowdsource the Truth, and certainly there is a huge library of video on the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, which people who are watching should go and subscribe to that channel if you're not already subscribed. You've been removed from Twitter. We'll get into that in a minute, but you've presented the strongest and most compelling evidence to support the theory that helicopters were used. You've played eyewitness testimony for us. You've showed video after video with strobe lights in the sky moving around. You've triangulated the locations of these aircraft in multiple videos, including municipal traffic cameras, police body camera footage. This is not Photoshop. This is not After Effects. This is not you being some kind of visual effects artist. You have scraped the internet for publicly available open source evidence and have put together the most comprehensive theory of what happened in Las Vegas on October 1st, 2017. You've blown away the investigation from the FBI, the Las Vegas Metro PD, and in my opinion, every other independent journalist who's been reviewing this material. You are absolutely at the pinnacle of this investigation, John, and what you've discovered in this, if I'm correct, seems to indicate that at least someone at the Las Vegas Review-Journal or interfacing with the Las Vegas Review-Journal knew that there were aircraft, knew exactly where they were and what to look for, and literally instructed someone at the Las Vegas Review-Journal to eliminate evidence of that in the video they posted online.
And that's the scary part, right? I published a few videos a while back looking at the New York Times footage and the Associated Press's footage,
right,
both of whom had edited out content.
Right.
And I said, well, wait a second. If the New York Times made this edit and the Associated Press made this edit, and now we have the Las Vegas Review-Journal making the edit. The thing with this Las Vegas Review-Journal edit that makes it so suspicious to me is when it was made. The fact that it was published, this video that they published where these edits were made, was published October 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the shooting was October 1st, which was a Sunday. October 2nd was Monday. Monday, everybody's shell-shocked. And by Tuesday the 3rd, they have this video already out.
Yeah.
What that means is somebody went to the Las Vegas Review-Journal on Monday or Tuesday and instructed them what they could and could not publish.
Right.
Because to assume that they would make this edit choice or these two edit choices by themselves organically, I think that's just naive.
Yeah, I agree. And so to be clear, what they've cut out is video evidence of lights that indicate aircraft in the sky that further corroborate your continually strengthening hypothesis that Boeing AH-6I helicopters owned by the Saudi Arabian National Guard, who were trained by U.S. forces led by General Frank Muth, these helicopters were used to perpetrate the attack.
Yeah, if you pause the footage, if you go back 10 seconds and pause the footage, I gave you sort of a countdown, right there. In the first 60 seconds of Cory Langdon's footage, the Las Vegas Review-Journal shows you less than 10 seconds, then they cut away for 13.6 seconds. Then they cut back, but only for 4 seconds. And then they cut away again for almost 33 seconds. So the question is, why are they doing all this in the first 60 seconds, and why are they doing this the first day after the attack?
Yeah.
One day after the attack, they're cutting out all this footage? Why would they do that?
Well, to cover the truth, obviously. And now, so you also have the original unedited footage from Cory Langdon, right?
Yes, and I run those side by side. So what we're showing here is what the Las Vegas Review-Journal did. And then if you want to scrub forward, 2, 3, 4 minutes, you'll see the two videos side by side. And I think you have to go to about 8 minutes. There you go.
Oop.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. So now how did you obtain the unedited footage?
My God, I think I downloaded it that week. I've had it the whole time.
And is it still available on the internet, or has it been removed?
Sure. Oh, sure. It's still up there.
But it's obviously somebody like the Las Vegas Review-Journal is relying on their massive reach to sort of overpower. We see him right there. You see the helicopter right there.
That's it.
Wow.
So the question, and this is flying over the venue, you have to sort of understand where she is located. She's looking kind of northeast right now, up towards the MGM Grand and the Tropicana. So that aircraft is flying right over the venue.
Right. She's parked right out in front of the Mandalay Bay, and we can see the obelisk of the Luxor. So the venue is sort of right here. Is this the tower of the Tropicana, this white thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So this is where Joe Napoli told us that he saw shells on the ground.
That's exactly right.
And look at where this helicopter is flying. This is when Cory Langdon is hearing gunshots.
That's right. And that's just one of them. There's another one that you're going to see that heads south. So there's two of them in this footage.
It's unbelievable.
All right. Now, this particular aircraft we triangulated in an earlier video that we made called Cory Langdon's An American Hero. And what we did was we found that same aircraft that was heading north on other police officers' body cams because we know what time of day this is. So by looking at the body cams and the timestamps on the body cams, we were able to find that helicopter from other perspectives and confirm its location. And we did that in earlier videos.
And as you've said earlier, you've checked Flight Radar 24. These are helicopters that are flying without transponders on them.
Right. So they're not reporting their location. So when you pull up Flight Radar, it appears like there's nothing there.
Right.
So it's like it's a ghost.
I would also say that I don't know if people are going to get this on the rebroadcast of these videos, but just looking at them on the screen right here, there's a noticeable reduction in sharpness and quality in the edited video as compared to the original video.
Yes, I noticed that too.
Yeah, so they're really decimating this footage to the extent that people can't get any meaningful, you can't really do any kind of forensic analysis. They're degrading it.
Correct. They're crushing it.
Interesting.
So there's these two big edits. One edit is 13.6 seconds. The other edit is about 33 seconds. And they both happen within the first 60 seconds of her filming. Right? So we've got this first helicopter comes in that's barely even visible in the Las Vegas Review-Journal's footage.
Right.
Then they delete this whole traverse of the venue flying up by the Tropicana. They delete all of this. Then they only come back for 4 seconds, and then they cut away again. Now, when they cut away the second time, that's when Cory says it sounds like it's further away.
Right.
Which would indicate a second shooter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me, just listening to her recording, it seemed like there were obviously two different locations where gunfire was coming from. One sounds like it's very far away from the building, and one sounds like it's right above her.
That's right. And this is really the first time that I studied this portion of the footage so closely.
Right.
And it's because they cut it out, so that's the irony. They cut out the footage, so I looked at it more closely, and then looking at it more closely, I see 2 helicopters, not 1. So this is the video I did a few months back. Cory Langdon's an American hero. And in that video, we figured out her location. We triangulated her location, calculated the sight lines. We picked up from other body cams and whatever. But there was another aircraft in the footage that I didn't see. And this time around, studying it, trying to figure out why the Las Vegas Review-Journal edited it out, this is where I finally found the second aircraft. So we see the one that's heading northbound up towards the MGM Grand. And then there's another aircraft that's going to make an appearance.
Yeah. Well, people are asking, Angelica is saying something about disinfo. I don't know what she means exactly, but this is actually info. You've checked the flight radar data. There is no Sundance helicopter. There's no Maverick helicopter flying over there right now. And I mean, frankly, this is, you know, so conspicuous, so smoking gun.
Yeah, I think it's egregious.
Yeah.
So to suggest that this is disinformation, disinformation would be purposefully
cutting it
out, spreading bad information, right?
Right.
So that would mean that, you know, I'd be working for somebody, you know, who would purposefully be spreading bad information.
Yeah. Have you spoken to Cory Langdon? I think she's done some interviews, right?
She has, and I've heard her say that she sort of maligns what she calls the UFO theory.
The UFO theory.
So.
Right. Well, I mean, again, we need to keep in mind that just because somebody is a witness to something, or even in this case, the person who recorded it, it doesn't mean they've analyzed. This woman was basically just sticking a cell phone out the window, primarily, I think, to record the audio.
Right.
And she couldn't have seen those dots.
No, I'm sure she didn't. The question is, who are they and what are they doing? Right. Yeah. So if these are known entities, if these are tour helicopters, they need to be flying at a certain altitude and at a certain velocity. The altitude, so for example, there are tour helicopters that leave from North Las Vegas, like 702 Aviation. If they are in the sky, they need to be at 3,000 feet, and they need to be traveling at 92 miles an hour. I calculated the velocity of this aircraft. It's 54 miles an hour, not 92. And it's no way at 3,000 feet. So that's not a tour.
Now,
Maverick
people looking at this,
is on the ground.
Sorry to interrupt you. One thing that occurs to me as people look at this is that at the moment that this passes behind the obelisk, there is a question if it's in front or behind, and it almost looks like, oh, somebody added that dot. But what I would say is,
there's a palm tree. There's a palm tree, and then the obelisk, and there's a little peekaboo slot right in there. Then it goes behind the Luxor. Yeah, the Luxor.
Well, what I'm thinking is that we've got an out-of-focus obelisk, and we've also, anytime your phone records a video, it's applying MPEG compression to it. So this is another one of those examples where compression artifacts, poor focus, etc., that definitely is flying behind it. But at first glance,
no question.
It's
definitely, definitely behind it.
So there's another section that they edited out.
Right, and this is where she says it sounds like it's farther away. And in saying that, that insinuates there's a second shooting location.
They cut out 33 seconds?
And this is all within the first 60 seconds. So within the first 60, they've cut out about 45 seconds of the first 60 seconds.
But you calculated exactly 33 seconds cut.
Yeah, well, 32.7 and 13.1, something like that. There's a fraction in there somewhere.
Got it.
So they edited all this out, and this is where she's going to say that it sounds like it's farther away.
Now it sounds like it's coming from farther away.
I mean, it's obvious. It's obvious to a layperson. You don't need to know anything about guns. You don't need to know anything about audio recording. it sounds much further away.
And then they come back, and what I did in this video was I compared that to the sound of the gunfire that was recorded inside the Tropicana Hotel.
How did you get that recording?
Again, public domain on YouTube. There was a person inside the Tropicana who was filming. They record the gunshots, and it's louder in the Tropicana than it is for Cordell Hendricks, who's one floor below the supposed shooting location.
And you know what, John? I'm reminded that Joe Napoli, if I recall correctly, told us that he heard gunshots. Is Joe Napoli with us in the chat? I'm pretty sure Joe Napoli told us that he heard gunshots inside the here's Joe. Joe?
Inside Tropicana.
Yeah, heard gunshots inside the Tropicana, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah, Joe did a podcast with me and Bartman Marine a couple weeks ago. And as the anniversary is coming up, a lot of folks are going to head back to Las Vegas. I know Bart will be there. I don't know if Joe's going to be there, but a lot of folks are going to be there.
Well, we don't want to dox anybody's location. Joe's had enough harassment from social engineers online. Joe is here. Joe, remind me, did you say that you heard gunshots inside the Tropicana? Joe will give us his input in the chat. All right, so, I mean, you very clearly, I mean, I don't know how anyone can say that's not a helicopter. Anybody who wants to now kind of, debunk this or whatever, better go find out what else that could possibly be.
I mean, I'm asking simple questions. Who are they? What are they doing? Why do they not appear on flight radar? If it is, if it is a tour, that's a jet that was taking off, by the way.
And you can see the different characteristic of how it flies. It just gets out of there right away.
Correct. So now this guy records gunfire from inside the Tropicana, and it's so loud at the Tropicana. Oh, yeah.
So this guy's inside the hotel room.
Yeah, and he records potentially a shooter on the parking deck between Mandalay and Delano. Potentially there's a shooter down there. But he certainly captures something above the Luxor. We've got a shooter above the Luxor, and you're going to see that as this starts back up again in a second.
Joe says someone heard inside the Trop. He started running, and we followed him. He never heard it, but he followed.
Okay.
Okay, so I didn't remember.
So right there in the footage from the Tropicana, we got a quick glance at what appeared to be a helicopter over the Luxor. And so the net of it is that it's as loud, if not louder, at the Tropicana than it is on the 31st floor.
Right.
For Cordell Hendricks. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, unless the helicopter is directly or close to in between those two locations. Right.
Right, and we just saw the helicopter flying near the Tropicana.
Right.
So there you go. So I guess if Angelica thinks that's disinformation, then
I could have been misinterpreting her comment. She might mean that the disinfo
what's been
wars.
Spread. Yeah. Well, it could be that Las Vegas Review Journal is spreading disinformation. That's for sure.
Yeah, and people in our chat are reminding us that the Las Vegas Review Journal is owned by Sheldon Adelson. It's interesting.
Right.
We've been talking a lot, John, about the various billionaires who own media empires. We've been talking about Robert Maxwell and his relationship to Jeffrey Epstein through his daughter, Ghislaine. We've been talking about Rupert Murdoch. He owns News Corp, which controls the New York Post.
Wendy
Fox
Deng.
News.
I saw you talking about Wendy Deng earlier today. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it's an interesting web out there. And
it is.
Yeah, here's the flight radar you asked about a moment ago, and there's nothing heading north over the venue. We see the jets taking off, but I just showed you the jet taking off. That's not what we saw. We saw aircraft heading northbound, and Maverick doesn't take off and start moving until 10:12 p.m. So we synced Cory's video to the official Las Vegas Metro Police videos to figure out, well, what was happening across the street while she's filming all this stuff. And as she's filming this helicopter, these guys, the cops across the street, are getting shot at. Right? So you got Brady Cook is getting shot and all that, and people are wondering, well, where are they getting shot from? And she's filming these aircraft above the venue. So I put on the map where she was located, right? Where at Mandalay Bay was she? What's her line of sight? What's her viewpoint?
Sorry,
right?
We've got something happened to our video. It's gone away. Oh, no, there it is. Wow, that was weird. That never happened before.
Okay.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. We had a black segment in your video. Sorry. I'm looking at 50 different screens here. Okay, so this is Google Earth. Right. Yeah,
right.
we've you know, with Joe
we've
and with Stephanie,
before.
we've walked through here. We've looked through this, yeah.
So these sight lines, these define what she can potentially see, right? So what she can see through here, she sees these helicopters. Some things are obscured, right? Certain structures are obscuring her view, so you understand where it can't be.
Right.
And then once you understand this and you start triangulating her point of view with the footage that we just looked at, we figure out, well, where were these helicopters in real life, right? Where were they in space? And what we see is they're over the venue. They're flying over the venue towards the Tropicana.
Wow.
They're not 3,000 feet in the air, right? You'd have to be at an elevation of 3,000 feet if you're on a tour. And they're not. And you have to be going 92 miles an hour if you're on a tour. And we see Maverick doing that later. We see Maverick doing it earlier, 9:47 p.m. Maverick comes in, everybody thinks Maverick's coming in hot. That's how fast they have to be going, 92 miles an hour. That's the speed. So
it's not that fast for a helicopter, really.
No, it really isn't. And when you're in the air, it doesn't feel that fast. So we know it can't be here to the right in the orange area because that's blocked by the building. But, you know, then you've got the venue and the helicopter comes up over the venue. So
it's beautifully done.
Thank you. So she starts filming it, you know, just shy of 10 minutes after 10. And we calculated the velocity of the helicopter by triangulating it. And, you know, again, if it's not at 3,000 feet, it's not a tour. And it's certainly not at 3,000 feet.
We've got Jerry Springer in the chat, who is obviously a fake account, saying
we're just
nonsense.
Funny name. So I think when you look at how did this video get edited the day after the attack, why were they concerned about it? No one had put forward a helicopter theory on October 2nd. So there was no controversy to worry about. I hadn't started publishing my stuff on the John Cullen channel until October 11th or 13th or something, and then they shut the channel down late in the month in October.
Yeah.
But there was no real talk of a helicopter attack until...
Even at that time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, until Truth Tracker and I started publishing, and then Shepard picked up on it and showed up on Alex Jones' show and started talking about it. Until then, there wasn't a whole lot of folks talking about a helicopter attack. Shepard kind of gave it some wind beneath its wings, and it took off after he was on Alex Jones. But it was clear that Shepard had already seen Truth Tracker's work, right? Because he was citing flight radar and all that. And Truth
Tracker was the first one to identify helicopters. Yeah. Is that it?
Truth Tracker was the guy who pulled up flight radar and started showing people what was happening on flight radar. And so I followed his research. I saw what he was suggesting, and then I downloaded the flight radar recordings myself, and I started studying them. The epiphany that I had was that the guys who were attacking never appeared on flight radar ever. They don't turn on transponders. What a lot of other guys were looking at was the Maverick helicopters and Southwest Airlines and transponders going on and off, and thinking that people were spoofing transponders. No. Military doesn't play games like that. They come in, shoot people, and leave. There's no monkey. That's it. And so these are military operators. The transponders are never on. They're not faking that they're another aircraft. They just don't turn them on. There's also no rope ladders. Nobody's going up or down ropes. There's none of that. They fly in, shoot people, and fly out. They don't land on a roof. There's no rooftop extraction. None of that monkey business. None of that stuff happens.
Hmm.
They're in and out in 11 minutes. That's it.
Right. Right.
But
All right.
when you've got the press being told what to do, when you've got the Las Vegas Review-Journal editing out key footage, when you have the New York Times editing out key footage, when you have the Associated Press editing out key footage, I think you have to ask yourself, who has the ability, who has the power to make these things happen inside a 24, 48-hour window? Who has the power to scrub flight radar and take that, Predator drone track that I recorded and have that replaced with something that looks like a Cessna?
Right.
Who has the ability to do that? Well, I think we all know who has the ability to do that.
Who?
And what that tells me, the agencies. And what it tells me is that this is being dealt with by the agencies as if it were a national security event. And I'm just getting frustrated with how much stuff we're sweeping under the national security rug.
Well, you see, I've become very curious, John, as to how much of this, I mean, it's easy to blame everything on the agencies, the CIA, whatever, but we don't really know. And there seems to be a growing body of evidence that indicates that there's a real blurring of the lines between what these agencies do and what corporations have the power to do. See, and what I'm talking about is when you think of a corporation like Amazon.com, Bezos owns the Washington Post. You think about News Corp. Murdoch owns Fox News and the New York Post. Maxwell was, everybody says, linked to Mossad, and he was his public face was that he was a media mogul in England, owning tabloid newspapers and owning the Daily News here in New York. So just think about just those guys. If that was all you controlled, how much sway you would have over the flow of information. Carlos Slim was a major investor in the New York Times. It's just becoming more and more clear as we explore these stories that, and I mean, we know it, controlling media, they control what people realize or what people perceive as reality, but we're starting to actually point to, specific actions, specific stories, specific newspapers that are linked to individuals, and it's really interesting. I really wonder to what extent these agencies serve corporations, or they've almost melded. Does the CIA control Amazon, or does Amazon have influence over the CIA? Like, where does one end and the other begin?
Yeah, well, I can tell you from experience that it's very close. So Amazon's very close. Other companies in the tech space are very close to the agencies.
Right.
And the agencies make that happen. They have money. They can offer high-tech companies tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, they can just print whatever money they want, it seems.
Right. And so, again, I think the thing that's so upsetting here is seeing that the news, which is supposed to keep checks and balances on the body politic, right? The whole idea is the press is supposed to hold our politicians to account for their actions. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing that the press is modifying evidence to pander to a narrative.
Yeah, and I think it's because these corporations realize that all you need to do is buy the newspaper, buy the television station, and then you can control what they say. You fire anybody that publishes stuff you don't like, and you pay people that do what you tell them to do. We know there are, nonviolent psychopaths, immoral people all over the place, desperate people, people who are forced to do things. There's a lot of circumstances under which they can really put somebody in a situation where they have no choice. And frankly, it doesn't even necessarily mean to imply that the people who are being influenced know it. If you're a person working at the Las Vegas Review-Journal who has a job there and a mortgage and a kid and medical insurance bills and all this stuff, and somebody tells you do this, there's a lot of people who do not like to go against the grain. They just do what they're told.
And it's scary stuff, and the people telling them what to do are scary guys.
Right.
And I don't doubt for a minute. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you had to ask me, do I think the Review Journal made these edits on their own accord? Or do I think somebody showed up and said, you can't show this and you can't show that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way that the Las Vegas Review Journal, in other words, to figure out that those are helicopters, you had to go through essentially the process that you've gone through or something very similar.
Correct.
You would have had to study tons of footage. No one just looked at that and said, oh, those are helicopters that we don't want anybody to see. Even if those dots were noticed. Yeah, you'd think it was police or whatever.
Right, exactly right. You wouldn't know that there's a problem. You wouldn't know that those helicopters don't appear on flight radar. You wouldn't know that.
Right.
So how did they come to the conclusion that they should cut out these aspects of the footage? And what that tells me is that people who told them to make these edits knew what happened. They knew by dawn the next day what had happened.
Well, and that means they had prior knowledge.
Well, I don't know. I mean, to me, this is the biggest question of all right now. As we're looking at what's happening with Comey, what's happening with the rest of the DOJ and the FBI, Strzok, Page, Comey, etc.
Right.
The big question is, was there foreknowledge? Did anybody know that this attack was about to happen and turn a blind eye? If they did, that explains to me why they reinstituted the death penalty for federal crimes. So I don't know.
I didn't recall that they did that.
Oh, yes, they did. The death penalty has been, capital punishment has been re-enabled by Attorney General Barr. So, if in fact folks who work for the U.S. government were aware that this attack was going to happen and turned a blind eye to it, to me that's beyond treason. I mean, that's unforgivable.
Yeah. So we've got somebody harassing Joe Napoli in the chat here. That is not acceptable. This person's going to get blocked right now.
Yeah, that's not okay. Now I've heard from a number of eyewitnesses, a lot of people who have been there who continue to thank me and the guys that I've been working with. When they thank me, they're thanking you, they're thanking Joe, they're thanking Bart, they're thanking all the different investigators that have been working together to get these facts out there.
Yeah.
And this is just evidence. That's all it is. It doesn't prove anything. It's evidence. That's it. But why would you delete it? Why would you hide evidence? And that's the part that gets me upset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so basically it's either somebody had foreknowledge or somebody figured out right away what happened and they decided to cover it up right away, and this was, what they were doing.
Sure. Well, again, if you assume that my hypothesis is correct, it means that there were State Department folks that were watching this VIP. And so if it was a helicopter attack and they were trying to kill a VIP, yeah, absolutely. The FBI is going to get a phone call immediately of what just happened, that there was an aerial assault at the Mandalay Bay and they tried to kill a VIP. Right. So I'm sure the FBI would find out immediately. The big question is, was there foreknowledge?
Right.
You look at the relationships between some of these guys and people like Mohammed bin Nayef. This is the guy who won the George Tenet Award from the CIA. He was highly decorated by us.
Pompeo, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Mohammed bin Nayef was a key guy, and also, I believe, was involved in this and in the planning of this. And so the question is, were there people who knew this attack was going to happen and thought that it would be to the detriment of the president? And because they had so much anger towards him and animosity, as we've seen from their other actions, was this a part of it? And is this what Attorney General Barr, is this his trump card? Is this his ace in the hole? Is that he has this evidence?
Now, wait a minute. I'm not sure I follow. So if Mohammed bin Nayef was part of this, why is Mike Pompeo giving him an award?
So Mohammed bin Nayef has been a leading intelligence leader for the Saudis. But at the same time, he's part of this circle of grandsons of the original Saud, Ibn Saud.
Hmm.
And so he and Al-Walid and Mansur bin Mukrin and all these other guys appear to be the ones that were trying to put the coup together.
Mm-hmm.
But
the coup in Saudi Arabia.
The coup meaning kill MBS, yeah.
Right.
But the thing is that Mohammed bin Nayef, he's the head spook, he's the head spy for these guys, and he has played the CIA beautifully for years and years and years.
Hmm.
Right? And so they give him awards and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if he wants to kill his cousin so that Al-Walid can become king, these guys pick their allegiances and they move forward. I think Mohammed bin Nayef's allegiance was not to MBS. I think he was part of the group that tried to get him killed.
Right.
But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion.
Right. And anti-corruption is telling us that bin Nayef was taken out of the king's line of power.
That's right. He was removed from the inner circle. In fact, at one point, he was the crown prince. And so he is another one of the crown princes that was pushed aside. So at one point in time, he was going to be the king of Saudi Arabia, which many people believe that's the wealthiest person on earth, is the king of Saudi Arabia.
I think that's probably true. He's got his finger on the button that could nuke the U.S. economy. Now, is this the guy that King Abdulaziz passed over because he has a drug abuse problem?
No, it's somebody else.
That's another brother. There's a lot of complicated politics in the Saudi Arabian royal family, and it's...
And I could be wrong. The 6 helicopters that we see flying around and shooting everybody, maybe they weren't the Saudis. Maybe El Chapo did have them in just over the border from Texas, and maybe that's where they came from.
We don't have any videos of a U.S. Army general talking about how anybody other than the Saudis were receiving these helicopters, and we don't have any eyewitness testimony, talking about something other than a sighting that sounds exactly like an AH-6I with commandos hanging out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, look who this is.
I think the smoking gun. Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. They were sold a bill of goods, man. They bought into it. They thought, they were close with these people, and they got conned. But I think the biggest smoking gun is the Guardian article from September of 2015. That's the smoking gun that leads me to believe that they were trying to kill MBS. That's the article that talks about regime change in Saudi Arabia, published in the Guardian, September 2015. And it's effectively an admission of a coup d'etat before the coup. So here they talk about how they're meeting with the cousins, and they're meeting all together, and they're talking about a leadership change in Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is not a democracy. You don't get to vote for these things.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. So when you read this letter and you read this article, it becomes clear that there's a whole bunch of upset grandsons of Ibn Saud that feel passed over. They're in their 50s or 60s, and MBS is in his 30s, and they feel like there's plenty of time for us to be king, and then he can be king. And so, they're talking here in the article about a change in leadership, and the only way you really can affect that is through a coup. I think it cost Jamal Khashoggi his life, talking about Arab Spring in Saudi Arabia. Arab Spring is just a nice way of saying a coup d'etat.
Right.
Right. So he was advocating a coup d'etat in Saudi Arabia, cost him his life. And the Khashoggi family and the Saud family are very, very close. Jamal Khashoggi's, I think it was his grandfather, was the personal physician to Ibn Saud. So they're very close. In fact, the MBS bought that $300 million house in France. That was built by another one of the Khashoggi kids. Right, and he was the number 2 guy working for the General Intelligence Presidency. So Khashoggi was the number 2 guy in the spy agency within the Saudi empire. So don't believe for a minute this guy's a journalist. He was the number 2 guy at the GIP, and he worked for Al Walid when they tried to set up a competitive news agency to Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
Right. He was the number 2 guy.
And it's interesting to see the interconnections between these guys and everything that's unfolding in the United States that's being covered up with regard to Jeffrey Epstein.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken, the Lady Ghislaine was previously owned by Khashoggi, and that was the yacht that...
That's right.
That,
so Adnan Khashoggi, yeah. Lady Ghislaine is the yacht. And after Robert Maxwell fell overboard, it was built for Imad Khashoggi. Now, Imad Khashoggi is an interesting guy. Imad Khashoggi had that boat built for his 18th birthday.
Wow.
Okay? So Imad Khashoggi had the boat built and then sold it to Robert Maxwell. And Imad Khashoggi is also the guy who, developed Chateau Louis XIV. That's the one that was sold to MBS. That's the most expensive home on planet Earth. That's the $300 million house that MBS bought. Imad Khashoggi built the house.
And then he sold the yacht to Maxwell, who renamed it Lady Ghislaine after his daughter. Ghislaine, depending on who you ask. And then he died, fell off of that yacht. Who owns that yacht now? I think Khashoggi bought it back, no?
No. It's been sold twice. I tracked it down. It was, I forget if it was in Mallorca or in the Pacific, but it's changed hands twice now.
Now, the other thing is, Donald Trump owned a yacht that Al Walid bought or something, right?
Donald Trump purchased his yacht from Adnan Khashoggi.
Right.
And then sold it to Al Walid bin Talal. That's correct. And that's it. Mm-hmm.
It almost seems like these guys are like, screw you, I'll buy your yacht. No, I'll buy your yacht. It's like, what is the significance of this, yacht one-upsmanship?
Yeah. So that used to be Trump's yacht in between, Trump Princess. Mm-hmm. But it started as Adnan Khashoggi's yacht. Then Trump had it, and then Al Walid bought it from Trump. And I think that's what Al Walid was referring to in his tweets when he was talking about, I bailed you out twice, 3 times, whatever. I think he was talking about when he bought the yacht, that he bailed out Trump. That was the
featured in Never Say Never Again. So this is Khashoggi's ship. Is this the one that Trump owned?
Yeah, Trump Princess. Mm-hmm. Yep.
There we go.
Sold in 1991. Yep.
So isn't that kind of strange that we've got, yachts, Khashoggi's, yachts, Maxwell, yachts, Trump. What the hell is going on here, John?
Yeah, I think these are all just billionaires, and billionaires,
trade
billionaires
yachts.
like their yachts. Yeah, they like their yachts. They like their yachts and they like their helicopters.
Right. It seems like a pretty tight-knit yacht club over there. So there's one other video that we wanted to look at that you had sent me. Here, this one. What did we want to look at in this one?
Let's see, which one was this? I think we may have looked at this already.
No. This is the one with the BBC.
Oh, okay. Well, effectively, we did. We looked at this a little bit. The BBC, and the New York Times both edited footage from inside the room, from the camera, from the Bitsko body cam. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's the same question. It's why would anybody make an edit to the only body cam that we have from inside the hotel room? Right? That makes no sense. So if in this video, let's see, if you jump ahead, let me have you jump ahead to 9 minutes and 24 seconds. Can you jump ahead to 9:24? There you go. All right. And this should be the Associated Press and what they did when they presented what happened inside the room. All right. And this is the footage that they edited out. So, again, it begs the question, why would you cut all this stuff out? We finally get to see what's happening. The cops are in the room. And now you guys are going to start selectively editing stuff? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And this is Officer Brosnahan that goes to the window. And then the Associated Press comes back. And so the question is, well, why did you cut out the first part of that? And then they cut out the rest of this. The New York Times did something very similar. And it's suspicious when one or two does it, but now we see the Las Vegas Review-Journal doing it. And the Las Vegas Review-Journal did it within 48 hours of the event. This footage came out months later. So the stuff that we're seeing here with Bitsko and the body cam and Associated Press and New York Times, they had time to work on this. They had time to assess it. The Review-Journal with that Cory Langdon footage, that was the next day. They were making that decision next day. Nobody had talked about helicopters. There was no helicopter theory on October 2nd. So they already started deleting evidence of the helicopters on October 2nd. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, it tells us that somebody knew. It tells us that these news agencies, I mean, they seem to coordinate these sort of things because they want to make sure that the information is doled out in the way that it needs to be doled out. It's amazing to see the workings of this control grid. Someone's telling us they got banned from George Galloway's chat on Sunday for asking him about his self-proclaimed good friendship with Jamal Khashoggi. Yeah, I saw him saying something favorable about Jamal Khashoggi on RT or something like that, and I was surprised to hear that. Yeah, here's the New York Times version of the story. They edited out 17 and a half seconds of Officer Brosnahan going to the window. And of all the officers that are in that room, we only have body cam footage from one officer. That's it. Right. Yeah, and Gen 2020 is reminding us of the NDAA Smith Modernization Act. So she's right. The government could be, they're authorizing these guys to do this.
Absolutely. The Smith Modernization Act gave the State Department, the GEC, the ability and the budget to produce counterintelligence. So basically, to refute my work, the government has a budget and people that do this, and it's not just legal, it's funded. And it's funded with your tax dollars, my tax dollars, which is, again, a little bit upsetting that I'm paying for this crap that they're putting out.
It's even more upsetting when those guys come here and interface with us directly. It's interesting how that occurred, but here they've updated the website since the last time I looked at it, John. Look at this. The Global Engagement Center is great for, people who want to ride the subway on their cell phone. That's a
very
weird
friendly.
ad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this could be an ad for, Urban Outfitters or something. Like what?
Right. So whereas we had their mission statement before that they had laid out rather clearly, it appears that they're not letting people know so much about that anymore. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, our staff, our partners, about us. Global Engagement Center is charged with leading the U.S. government's efforts to counter propaganda and disinformation for international terrorist organizations in foreign countries. See, those vague statements are quite troubling. And then when we see people with names like Jerry Springer telling us that this or that is disinformation, we know how many people have said, who in the alternative news world is working for Mossad or whatever. Are these efforts to label people as foreign propaganda so that funds from the GEC can be used to pay whoever to bring lawsuits to come on here and lie about you and spread disinfo?
I find it funny, when people think that I'm spreading disinformation, it's as if they're playing checkers and they haven't really thought that move ahead 3 or 4 moves.
Right.
Meaning, and so what I mean by that is I'm telling the world that a bunch of Saudis grabbed a bunch of Saudi helicopters and shot up a bunch of Americans. Now, who would spread that information? Who would put that in, assuming it's not true, right? So assuming that that's all nonsense, who would spread information like that that this was an aerial attack by Saudi Arabia.
Somebody who wants you to dislike Saudi Arabia.
That's right. Somebody wants to discredit Saudi Arabia, make them look bad, or what have you. Now, who is Saudi Arabia's enemy? Who's
Iran?
Iran. So when people say I'm a disinformation agent, basically what they're saying is I'm working for Iran to embarrass Saudi Arabia. And I don't think that that's real credible. I do not work for Iran. I know some Iranian people in New York, and they're lovely, but I'm not working for Iran, and this is not an agenda to do anything against Saudi Arabia. That's absurd. So when people talk about disinformation, you have to ask yourself, who would be spreading this story? Why? To what avail? Is Iran trying to embarrass Saudi Arabia and I'm working for Iran? That's just absolutely absurd. Right? So I think it's more likely that there's helicopters in the sky. I think that's more likely. And since no one is able to answer who are they and what are they doing, it's not Maverick, it's not Sundance, it's not 702 Aviation, it's not the police. So who is it? Nobody has an answer 2 years later. So I don't think that's disinformation. I think that's information. I think that there's evidence.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the real thing, is that you're not you're not sitting on a podcast talking and telling people stuff. You're just showing information that's already there and pointing out things that people haven't seen. So how is it disinformation? It's just information.
Right. So, for example, the fact that Joe Napoli saw spent brass shell casings in the street.
Yeah.
That's not disinformation. That's a fact. Joe saw them there. And then we have another woman who also saw them there who doesn't know Joe. And Joe doesn't know her. So we have independently corroborated evidence. That's what that is. Evidence. There's also evidence that magazines fell out into the street. That's not disinformation. That's evidence. Right? That's evidence. So
that's
everything you're going to see.
That is.
Yeah. There's live rounds, there's magazines in the street, there's guns being found in the street, all kinds of craziness. And then we've got gunfire at midnight. Is that disinformation when a whole bunch of police officers say that's gunfire?
Yeah, we've heard that on the videos.
Right, so is that disinformation when I report that? Is it disinformation when I tell you that there's gunfire at midnight even though Stephen Paddock is dead? When I've got a whole bunch of cops on camera going, that's gunfire, that's gunfire. I don't think that's disinformation. I don't. Yeah. I think that's evidence. So people don't want to accept my evidence because of what it means. And it's scary as hell. It's very scary stuff to accept what I'm telling people.
Yeah. And it's disgraceful that somebody would come into this chat and start saying stuff to Joe Napoli. They weren't there. They're just hurling accusations. Joe Napoli's had a death in the family in the past couple of weeks. It's like, what kind of people are these coming onto YouTube and crapping on somebody they don't even know with information that they're making up?
And think about, why would anybody do it? It's because of how scary and how upsetting this is and how it makes them feel that the world around them is out of control, that they can't trust who they thought they could trust.
I think you're being too kind. I think these fake name people are the same idiots that we know who are just using alternative accounts and trying to put Joe on edge.
Well, that's possible. But I think that most people are terrified by this iteration, this version of the story, this version of what happened. I think it's terrifying to most people. And many of the investigators, many of the independent investigators on this, still refuse to accept that it was an aerial attack. Forget who owned the helicopters. Forget any of that stuff. Just the fact that it was an aerial attack. There's still plenty of investigators who refuse to accept it, even with all the evidence that we've put forward so far. So
well, that's just it. I mean, refusing to accept it sounds like we're telling them something and they must accept it. What I'm saying is no one has offered a sensible alternative explanation for all of the things that you've found.
That's right.
In fact, there's almost nothing we can conceive of that would even make sense.
Well, that's why I keep saying El Chapo. That's the only other thing I can think of. Well, who else has 6 helicopters? Who else has got that kind of air power?
But what
that
would
they
the
could
purpose
show
of
up
El
and,
Chapo doing it? I mean, it doesn't...
well, I say it tongue in cheek, but
Right.
we just took $16 billion of his assets and incarcerated him. So if he wanted to get back at us, yeah, shoot up a concert. And do I think that's what happened? No. Did I see any evidence of it? No.
Right.
But he's really the only other guy with a chip on his shoulder and a bunch of helicopters that I know in the vicinity. But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
Well,
Again, whether or not it's who I think it is and who I've put forward in the hypothesis, that's just a hypothesis. The evidence is that it's an aerial attack, period. It's an aerial assault. So we have that evidence. Whether or not the hypothesis of who is behind it is accurate or not, I don't know. But as you've said, I haven't seen an alternative hypothesis that's equally cogent.
or
and what
even
that means,
remotely.
Right. So what that means is, in the world of hypotheses, when you have a hypothesis and you've used the type of logic that we've used, you then look for an alternative hypothesis that is equally well researched, and we can't find that. We don't see any of those. So that's the problem. Yeah.
Right.
So you brought up my Twitter profile account.
Well,
is
I wanted to
suspended.
let everybody know that you've been suspended real quickly in the last couple of minutes. Give us the story, what happened here, and will you be back on Twitter?
I'm assuming I won't be back. They don't want me back. I've sent them a number of emails, and they just simply don't respond. And as you see, they suspended the account. So effectively what I did was I posted the photographs from the New York Post after the El Paso shooting of the El Paso shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And there were two different photos. They were, or it certainly appeared that it didn't look like the same kid.
Right.
And all I did was post that on Candace Owens' Twitter stream, and within 60 seconds, my account was shut down.
60 seconds.
It was so fast, it was unbelievable. And
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what happened there. I've written them a whole bunch of emails. They don't respond, so they don't want me in their club, and I think I know why.
That's really too bad, John, but we should encourage people who have been looking for more information about John Cullen and his investigation to subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. But really the best thing that you can do, and a lot of people may not know about this yet, John has started a podcast where he gets really detailed on each of his videos, similar to what we do here with John on Crowdsource the Truth. You can get all those over at patreon.com/IamJohnCullen. And I hope that people will sponsor John on Patreon, get on there and help support this work. I know there's a lot of people who have been watching all the videos that we've done, and people need to remember that this type of work is not sustainable if it's not supported by the viewers. And the same goes for Crowdsource the Truth. I hope that people will join us over on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're really starting to understand how this network of news media outlets are controlled by billionaires and sometimes even criminals who want to use them to disseminate false information. That's disinformation, when you take the actual information and cut out a part of it that would inform you as to what's really going on and show you a portion of it. That's disinformation. Looking at analyzing the original video is information. So I really appreciate you joining me tonight, John, and I appreciate everybody who's watching. I want to thank all the generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors and remind everyone that we're just not able to bring you this information without your support. So if you're not a sponsor right now, either of John Cullen's Patreon channel or of Crowdsource the Truth, please get over there and sponsor John on patreon.com/IamJohnCullen. John, anything you want to share before we close it out for tonight?
And just a tip of the hat to you, Jason. You've done an amazing job, not just on this, but on all these other topics, of bringing really bright people to the forefront and questioning the narratives that were being given. And just a real tip of the hat to you. You're just killing it. And
thank you.
I'm impressed. Thank you.
I really appreciate you saying that, John, and I couldn't do it without you and the other contributors to the show, and certainly not without the sponsors. So I want to thank everybody, wish everybody a really good night. We've got another big day tomorrow. Make sure you tune in to Discovery CSI with David Hawkins, and I'm going to have a special surprise show that I am still putting together, but it's going to deal with this very topic, the nexus of news media, intelligence operations, government cover-ups, all that sort of stuff. We've been uncovering amazing information relative to the New York Post, this Ghislaine Maxwell trip to In-N-Out Burger in Los Angeles, really excessive amount of reporting in the New York Post about In-N-Out Burger in general, and I think people are going to find it extremely interesting. John, have an excellent night. I want to thank everybody for watching. I'll see everybody soon.
Thanks again, Jason. Bye-bye.